you can outsource these students and outsource these students and begin saving a lot of money. So look at it as your first step to the next generation by bringing in other means of delivering high-quality programs on site. And the exciting part is that the credits are transferable. Long ago, I attended a satellite campus. The main campus wouldn't accept their own credits. Those days are over, and I think you've got some marketing things that can help. But I disagree with you entirely that we need not look at what got us here. We absolutely have to, otherwise you'll be doing it again next year. For the last 50 or 100 years, we've been giving everybody and his brother a tax break, an incentive, some other gimmick, largely at the community level at the town. Easton no longer is predominated by homeowners. It's now operated by landlords, many of which have got the legal resources, the lobbying resources, the financial resources to run circles around you. And they're getting all kinds of breaks, and they're not putting it into the community. You've got some deals that go back 50 years. Time to dust them off. Because if the school district goes downhill, we all as homeowners die. If our taxes go up, we die. And the current means, the mayor may be the best mayor Easton's ever had, but things that benefit Easton in many respects really hurt the school district. Your ability to move forward and have a good tax base needs to be there. So all of the robbing Peter to pay Paul you're doing won't help unless you get your tax base back and growing. And giving it away to people who have their degrees from Columbia and Harvard, and they've lobbied in Harrisburg, and they've got 29 different codes to get through. My friends who are twice as smart as I am say, Drew, you'd understand how we do things. And I say, yes, I do. It's just I haven't figured out all the details yet. They have. So that, you can look at any community, and you know what one bad landlord can do to a block. Now multiply that over and over and over again in terms of your basis. If the landlord doesn't pay attention to what he's doing, you've got some major educational problems, and you have no revenue. So please take a more serious look at beginning to interact with a leadership level on the entire community. Let's face it, your budget's bigger than the supporting communities. You should be running the show, not following behind, picking up what the horse left. And unfortunately, that's the position you're in. So I wish you the best. You've got some very, very tough decisions, but I hope you're not making the same ones year after year after year. So, please, thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks. Is there anyone else this evening? Seeing no hands. The summary is rather simple. We're going to come back with some updated information based on the budget so that we can make a decision in 2 weeks on voting for either exceeding the cap or not exceeding the cap. They're coming back with the Pell contract, coming back with the agreement for Palmer and Company, and also for the contract with Xerox. That concludes the report.
Number 4, buildings and grounds, and actually I'm going to stay as I begin with letter A. Basically, letter A is just an update on an ESCO plan that I proposed about a year and a half ago. Not so much an update, but an understanding, a quick understanding for everybody. The guaranteed energy savings plan was created under Governor Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania some years ago. Numerous schools in Pennsylvania have used it. Numerous companies have used it. The airport, the city of Bethlehem, many different businesses and profit, nonprofit have used it and reported good things about it. Basically, what it did was Governor Corbett put a team together and they vetted energy savings companies. They looked at the balance sheets, made sure that they can guarantee savings. Because if you say guaranteed savings and your energy doesn't realize those savings, the company then must cut you a check for the difference of what wasn't realized, what was not realized. So Therefore, the state vetted these companies and put a list together. There's numerous ways we can go about it. We can float a bond to pay for these energy upgrades. And we haven't decided that yet, but if you float a bond to pay for those upgrades, by law, the savings you receive will pay for that bond, your bond repayment, but can't be used for anything else. Okay, it has to be used for the bond repayments. You can't use it for budget or salaries or things of that nature. If we already have capital, that liquid that we have that we would like to use, then we can take that savings, put it into a budget shortfall, put it wherever we want, because we didn't float a bond for it. What we did was, the old board approved an RFQ, which was request for qualifications, and along with our engineering firm, we went out and we got some vendors that were interested, that were on this list, and we picked two, I believe it might be two. Out of there, we wanted to stay away from, we wanted to go with vendor neutral companies. So vendors who weren't going to try to push their own product on us. And we picked two, and we sent out RFPs, requests for proposals. We were supposed to get it back a couple times. They ran into some snags. They had to gather a lot of information so they could give us accurate savings numbers. So those RFPs are due back January 20th?
Correct.
January 20th, and our engineering firm and our administrations will look over them, and then the board looks over them. If it's savings that are gonna benefit us, or there's savings that are not gonna benefit us, and there's no point in going forward. It's up to us to make that decision. Some of the good things about the two companies that are vying for this job is, again, the guaranteed savings, so it's not realized until clear. They also have people that will come into the classroom and teach the kids, do a class with the kids on the energy savings, things of that nature. They will also use workers. They come in and they have to outsource the work, electric, this or that. They will use, if we direct them to, they will use local labor. People from our community, people that pay school taxes, they will make sure they're the ones working. So we're not bringing companies in from wherever. We're bringing local labor in to do the work. So it's a great program. If anyone has any other questions tonight or afterward, I'd be happy to send you some information that I presented publicly before, but that's just basically the update. So we're waiting on January 20th to get all the information. We'll then come back with our engineering firm and things and explain the whole breakdown, and then the board will, ask questions and decide if we want to move forward. All right?
Going to letter B. First of all, I want to have just say today that we experienced another school shooting in our nation, that a 12-year-old boy, a 7th grader, came into his school with a shotgun and pulled out of his bag and shot 2 students. As we enter to a new year, here we are in our nation facing another school shooting. As you can see, letter B is the vestibule and building assets renovation project dealing with security. I just want to put on record that we, as a school district in Easton, will take as a #1 priority the safety, the security of our students, our staff, and our guests seriously. Times are changed, and we are, as a district, should change with our security and upgrades throughout our district. So I just want to start off with a moment of silence for the 2 children that was shot today, and we'll start our letter B. Moving on to letter B, Mr. Simonetta, can you give us an update on the vestibule building assets and renovation project?
Thank you. I was not aware of that. Thank you for the sad news, anyway. And since he mentioned that, I also wanted to update the board. If you recall, we were talking about additional police for our elementary buildings, targeting there first. We put the advertisement out. We did it internally once to all, and we received a few applicants. We then had put it out in the newspapers. The application deadline, I think, is going to be February 10th. So we'll start that process for interviewing, and at some point, we will talk to the board about how many we want to have. I mean, the initial target was at least one for every 2 elementary buildings, but we can talk about what we want to do when we get the applications, and depending on the number of qualified applicants that we have. So, okay, on the vestibules. Again, another well-vetted project going through. I appreciate Mr. Obi came on board. We went through, brought him up to date on some of the project, had some very good suggestions. We met with the principals again, some additional suggestions. I think we presented that either in December or even in November. But at any rate, the RFP or the bids were put together, and what we're at now is I'm just refreshing your memory, because the bids are going to be out, and they're going to be opened on February 11th. Now there's that quick turnaround, and if you recall, we wanted to do this as soon as possible in this year to get it going off the ground. There's going to be a lot of construction over the summer. Get it going right away as soon as school starts. And also, the earlier you do it, the more competitive pricing is going to be. The contractors aren't as busy yet, so they're going to be a little aggressive on the numbers. So we are going to open them on February 11th because of the timelines and the requirements for advertising. We couldn't get it in before the February 4th board meeting. What we'd like to do is present the findings for possible approval at the February 25th board meeting. So the suggestion is going to be, I'm probably doing this backwards, I should have went through the presentation first, but anyway, if we can form some type of ad hoc committee, whether it's the Buildings and Grounds and the board president, to, with the engineering company, look at the bids and go through that. At least there's a few members that have the opportunity to review the bids with the engineering company, and then you'll hear our recommendations at the February 25th meeting. If we wait till March, then we lose that ordering time for a lot of pieces as well. So there is an ordering time, and that's why February is an important date to award. So that being said, we'll talk about that when we have questions. So anyway, update, Phase 1 upgrades, secured vestibule construction and modifications, card reader access to replace all the digital keypads, and there's going to be additional card readers. If you recall, the card reader at the front door, that may be open, but the second door is going to be locked. There's going to be a card reader there for staff, so they're not stopped and have to go through that second entrance thing. Additional surveillance cameras placed at all card readers and all vestibule renovations, and even some of the existing ones. And connection of existing door contacts into new system. That used to be Phase 2. Through the discussions, we moved that up to Phase 1. We want to have all door contacts into the card readers. It's going to be a unified system. Genetec is the system of choice, and if you recall, also we currently have, I think, 3 different operating systems for our district-wide access. Yeah, it's not the way to go. Different cards for different buildings, so that's all going to be into one. The Phase 2, additional surveillance cameras. When we were going through the buildings, a lot of principals, and rightfully so, in areas inside the building, in certain intersections, there could be cameras there so we can look, see what's going on or go back. In all the elementary buildings right now, we don't have the ability to go back. It's not on DVRs. This will all be DVRs. What the Phase 1 will be all DVRs where we can go back to it. We'll have recordings of it. Phase 2 will just be adding cameras. The system that we're going to propose for this summer is fully upgradable. So as we add additional cameras, it'll be able to take them. That's me. I thought I was back there too, Ange. So the delivery of Phase 1 is the public bidding process, which I talked about. The bids are out, advertised. We're going to, obviously, we're going to send to vendors that the engineering company is familiar with, but we're also going to send when those that request as well. The access control equipment, we're going to purchase through the state contract, the piecers, that's already bid. That also, it's also the Genetech systems where we'll be able to mingle that right in there. That'll save a lot of the bidding and a lot of the low bidding. One of the thoughts through this process was if you get the low bidder, it may not be something that coincides with some of the current systems. So as long as we're not violating the bidding laws, which we're not, and the pricing is already bid through the state, we thought it was best to go through the equipment through the state system. Go back to the numbers. Next page. You know, we talked about, you saw this number before, $1.4 million. Includes a contingency of $130,000. One of the things that came up tonight when we talked about Mr. Reinhardt's and the administration's suggestions on the use of buildings, and are we going to change buildings, shut down an elementary school for instruction. We'll talk with Josh and we talked about doing some alternates, basically for a pull-out deduction. Hey, we might not be using that building, we might sell that building, let's pull it out and maybe use it as a deduction. The good part about that is we don't have to worry about that right now, because what we're looking at in the future is maybe reducing an elementary building or using it for something else, so that access still needs to be upgraded. The two areas that we're talking about selling or not using is the academy and this building. Those two buildings are not part of this. So there's nothing we have to worry about with that in mind. So again, $1.4 million, we're hoping it comes in lower than that, and that money will be paid for out of that capital reserve. The timelines, the bid's out in January. We will have a pre-bid meeting, mandatory for all vendors. The bids will due February 11th. We're hoping to get approval by the board on the February 25th board meeting, and then start the process immediately and start implementing and begin construction immediately after the first day of school. I do have two gentlemen from Dewey Engineering, Mr. Hartman, Mr. Grice here, if there's any questions that I can't answer. But again, I just want to give the board an update on where we are. The bids will come in, and if the pricing is what we hope it to be, and it all can get done, we would like to recommend, we've been talking about it for more than a year now, and I think it's something that we need to move on.
Mr. Simonet, can you give an update on the new radios that's been implemented in our school district?
Yes. Oh, now you're really pushing the memory bank. We just purchased about 45 digital radios. Same kind of scenario. We have two operating system and radios here. We had one for the transportation department, which was on a repeater service. They're still on their own, but we've updated the repeater service through industrial communications. We were not able to communicate from this building to another building with the old radios. We upgraded to digital. Every principal, every assistant principal, and every main office in all the buildings now have a digital radio, where if they need to contact the central office one-on-one, they can do that. The repeater new repeater is being installed at the middle school. The old repeater was there, very old, and it was also installed inside somewhere, so the service was still not that great. We're going up on the roof and installing the repeater services. So basically, transportation has one that can communicate directly with school, that has already come in handy, as opposed to trying to get a phone call or somebody not answering and voicemail. The maintenance department, Tim's office has one. All central administrators have an individual one, plus we have one for this building. So it just really enhanced our ability to communicate in the instance of an emergency. We also have one-to-one calling. We have the ability for text messaging, one-on-one, And we also have the ability to be off-site and able to communicate if we're not here. We know how the phone systems are and how they work or sometimes don't work. So in all, we upgraded 45 radios. Those old radios are distributed throughout the building, so we also gave more people, staff, ability to communicate in their own building with that as well. I think so you'll see that bill, by the way, coming up, which is also part of that security that we talked about out of that capital reserve money. That security took high priority.
DEI?
No, we're just happy to field any questions.
Is there any questions for DEI? Seeing none, we're going to move to letter C. Mr. Simonetta again.
What is that?
City of Easton Tree
Oh,
Planning Project.
okay, sorry. A while ago, Ms. Mondello from the city office called indicating their desire to plant trees along Spring Garden Street outside of Cottingham. Beautification project they got a grant for. And although they don't need our permission, asked to ask for it and asked for good graces, and we certainly, beautification in the area is always welcome. I even asked about how big they are, what they're going to do, how much they're going to take, and cutting in and outside, not a problem. They're going to grow basically they're going to take out a slab and plant them in there, and it's all going to be taken care of, and they are responsible for everything and maintaining. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention that they will be doing that, so if you see something going on, that they just didn't take it upon themselves to do that, they asked, and we complied. And I hope nobody has a problem with that.
Is there any questions for Mr. Simonetta on the, anything of the letters A, B through C that you heard tonight amongst the board? Seeing no questions, we're going to open up to public comment. Is there anybody in the public who would like to have a comment on these issues?
Mr. Simonetta?
Yes, sir.
I hope that the complex issues of building security and as they apply to daycare centers and the overlap, we're able to transfer the appropriate costs back to our various tenants. If you don't understand the question.
Oh, I understand the question. And that's a conversation that, that cost will be developed and transposed to all entities occupying our buildings that we charge a fee to.
But they have very different requirements, and I can attest that in a high-security Center City, Philadelphia building, the law says, the regulations say the parent must be able to walk in without being impeded and just get there, which is the exact opposite of what you're doing, and it's going to make some real interesting problems, which should be borne by the tenant, not you. All I'm suggesting is make sure that all of those costs, because we can't afford to be the host as a freak.
Duly noted.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Summary, one more? Oh, I'm sorry.
I am John Kennedy from Easton, Cattell Street. In thinking about your relationship with Northampton College and also the budget, I'd like to encourage you to use your imagination. We're in a time of growth in our economy. And I think you're being a little conservative on the reserve. The other thought that I had when I first heard about the vestibule plan, I went to the internet and looked rather, I took some time. I couldn't find any evidence that vestibules actually make any difference. Now, maybe you've researched this and found some strong evidence that it would actually make a difference in the actual security of the building. But we look at things that have happened, and I don't know whether those buildings had vestibules or not, or whether they would have made any difference, but sometimes it's wise to actually look at what things might accomplish. Thanks for your time.
Excuse me, sir. Thank you. And can you just please sign it for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Is there any more public comment? Seeing none. Summary, we're going to submit proposals, take vendors in for contractors to do the work that DEI is submitting. Is there any other questions, or can we move on?
Thank you, Mr. Obi.
Right.
Number 5, policy, we're going to go with Mrs. Bennett.
Policy committee is starting off cash advances, policy 810.1, filling out workers.
Thank you, Gary. I'd like to say hello to all the board members, especially all the new board members. I wasn't here in December. It's nice seeing all of you. I hope you're feeling comfortable in your new roles, so thank you for joining us. This is an existing policy. It's policy 810.1. It's drug and alcohol use for covered drivers. Primarily it affects school bus drivers, but we did add some language because our maintenance employees do operate school vehicles, and so they are going to be included to some extent in this policy. I will go through the policy, and then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them when I'm finished. If you go down to paragraph 3 on page 1, we included and part-time in blue because it only said full-time workers, so if we have any part-time workers, obviously they're included in this policy. And then the last sentence of paragraph 3, we're proposing new language that does say, maintenance employees and mechanics who operate district vehicles as part of their employment shall be deemed to be regularly assigned to drive school district vehicles and shall be covered by this policy. Our mechanics that work in a bus garage, I believe they all have their CDL licenses and they operate school bus, so when we do our federally required random drug testing, they are part of that mix. The maintenance employees, however, the general maintenance people that do operate trucks and drive from school to school, that kind of thing, they are not involved in that random drug testing per the law. If we go to page 2, about halfway down, under employee prohibitions, there was a paragraph, the second paragraph under employee prohibitions on page 2 that reads, no covered driver shall report for duty or remain on duty when the driver uses or tests positive for any drug, except when the use is pursuant to the written instructions, of a physician. So we added language below that says any covered driver who operates a vehicle while taking drugs or substances prescribed by a physician, as described above, is required to provide written documentation of the physician's certification to the immediate supervisor. Because, if our drivers are reporting for work and the doctor is saying it's fine, to take this medication, we at least want to know about it. If you go down to the bottom of page 2, we added a sentence that says, any covered driver who refuses to submit shall be immediately suspended and may be subject to termination. That's submit to post-accident random drug testing. Right? If you go to page 3, about 2/3 of the way down, the blue language, the 2 paragraphs, we're proposing the district receives credible evidence that a covered driver has operated a motor vehicle under the influence of drugs or alcohol, either while on duty or off duty, or presents for duty under the influence of drugs or alcohol, the driver shall be terminated. In such instance, the driver shall be immediately suspended pending termination proceedings. Such suspension and termination shall occur regardless of whether the covered driver is convicted of driving under the influence. We were successful in getting language in the new transportation CBA, and so we wanted to mimic that language in our policy. The Teamsters Union is supportive of our efforts in dealing with drivers that are having convictions. Then it goes on to say covered drivers who are arrested or charged with but not yet convicted of driving under the influence or any other drug or alcohol-related violation related to the operation of the motor vehicle shall be immediately suspended regardless of whether the incident occurred while the driver was on or off duty. All right, the next page was language we had proposed, but then in conversations with the board had struck, so that's not being discussed. If you go to page 5 of 9, under duties of the Transportation Department, we added a section under item 1. The employee shall have the right to appropriate union representation where applicable. You know, I'm the director of human resources. When I meet with employees, I always afford them the right to have union representation. We always give them that one. Item number 4, we added director of human resources to the part where transportation people are investigating something with the bus driver. They must then refer it to me to get me involved for appropriate action. On page 6, we have just a couple, language changes about covered drivers, which is what this policy is all about. At the bottom of page 6, item number 3, it does say random testing shall be conducted on all covered drivers who are subject to random drug testing under federal law. So that was something we wanted to put in there, just because it is a matter of law. That's about it. Except the very last page, we added Director of Human Resources to the person who will receive and maintain all of the statements certifying that all the covered drivers have received a copy of the policy and are aware of their obligations as covered drivers. Those are our recommendations. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, John. Just, excuse me, going back to page 3. Looking at the language that says, in such instance, the driver shall be terminated. I think that, well, this is my personal thought, that this language is a little bit rocky, and I'll tell you why. Because it says that the driver shall be terminated, and then immediately following it says, in such instance, the driver shall be immediately suspended pending termination proceedings. I don't think that we have clarity on termination proceedings as we have seen historically. So I think we might want to sharpen that language up just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm following you, but we were successful in working with the Teamsters through collective bargaining to get language in their contract that
Okay.
pretty much, if we have evidence,
Right.
credible evidence, and
But what I'm referring to is the wording that the driver shall be terminated, and that being clearly written in the policy. And then it going further to rely on termination proceedings. If termination proceedings go a different direction, I believe that we will be obligated to follow those.
Darren, I'm going to
Yeah.
have our solicitor address that.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason we put it, you're right, Darren, everything you're saying is absolutely correct. I think that the purpose of this particular language, and maybe not spelling out the fact that there is going to have to be procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, only the board can terminate employees. So if the board doesn't vote for that, doesn't vote for it. But we were successful, I should say, not me particularly, but John and the negotiating teams were successful in actually getting the same language in the contract, and it's quite remarkable. Also, in the federal litigation that came out of this, our right to immediately suspend for DUI even off the job was confirmed by the federal court. I think one of the things that we're particularly concerned about is, what do you do with a driver who has a DUI, and notwithstanding whether or not this may be a one-time thing, does it not really erode confidence in the public and the parents and so forth if you put somebody on the bus who's pending a DUI? Now, the problem with having conviction language in there is that as a practical matter, the first time there's a lot of people don't get convicted, they can still have an arrest. But you are absolutely correct, that termination cannot occur without the process. But I think that what this says is that if you get a DUI, trust, Robert, that you will be headed in that direction. Of course, the ultimate determination is the board's. And
Right.
we can't bypass the due process procedure, but it's required both by statute and by constitution. Due process requirement.
Gotcha. In your legal opinion, do you think wording such as the driver shall be immediately recommended for termination would be a little better? Or?
Ordinarily, I might have done something differently, but what I like about this is it's the identical language that's in the contract.
Okay,
That's why we did it that way.
gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Anything else?
This is a reworking of this
Yes.
policy. Therefore, we're considering this the first reading of our new, so therefore it won't go on this board meeting's vote,
It would go on.
would not, it would, right, it would go, the second reading would be the next,
So February.
February, right, the next meeting, okay? All right. And then the next policy that we were going to discuss is, I don't know if it's a policy number, is it? Yeah, there's no policy number, so it would be, discussion of athletic advertising for Cottingham, and I don't know, I should have looked that up to see what number that would go under, I didn't see it. No. Right, right. So, did you want to discuss anything about it, or?
About a year ago, it was I brought up, and myself and Mr. Ryder, regarding advertising at Cottingham Stadium. We look at Banco Field in Bethlehem, they advertise. But we put Cottingham Stadium here, but I think, further discussion has happened and not much else but discussion, and we really need to move on it. But I think, going at Cottingham Stadium is just undershooting it. I think we can use Cottingham, our campus out here with our soccer fields and things. Definitely our wrestling events, because we have tons of people come out wrestling. So what I would like to do is with board, support, is, give direction to Mr. Simonetta to start looking at other districts that advertise, how much they charge, their policy, their terms for how long they advertise, things like that. Obviously, then we'll put a policy together, but I think this is something that we need to move on immediately. There's a great amount of revenue that could be generated that way. I know I spoke with the Chamber of Commerce, and they're willing to give us a stack of all the businesses that they deal with to reach out and solicit, but unfortunately, we need to set parameters, or fortunately, either way. We need to set the parameters of things and agree on it as a board before we go out and start soliciting. But also listening to the bullet points that Mr. Reinhardt brought up, I think we killed two birds with one stone. Look at Cottingham, our wrestling, and all our fields, but also look at, discuss bus advertising as well. I'm assuming there may be two different policies. So,
Well,
Could
it would
be
be
a clause.
property.
yeah.
Could it be a clause in the same policy,
Yes,
right? One
yes.
buildings, one on
Yes,
vehicles.
that's what I'm thinking, because
you
it's
know,
it's
like an
property.
A and a B, yeah.
It would be district property
Yeah.
regardless.
So, if I'd like to hear input from the other board members, but, if we're relatively in agreement with that, I think that's something that must start immediately as well. To start, I think unfortunately we're about 10 years behind doing it, but we should start now.
I think one thing that we ought to look at is there are some fields currently that do have advertising on them, and we need to recognize who got money for it, what they got. It was probably a fundraising type thing for some of the teams that use some of those fields, in particular, the baseball field has a significant amount of advertising around the outfield. So we need to also look at what they currently have for advertising and where the proceeds went, just so that we have a background.
Yeah, Frank, that was going to be one of my questions, too. Where do you see the proceeds from this going? Because if it's the type of thing, like Kerry said, with baseball, and the money stays with baseball, then it's appropriate for track to stay with track, and swimming and wrestling and so on and so forth, especially if we talk about pay to play. Now, if that's not the case, so I mean, football then would be, whoever with football and so on and so forth. But if you see it coming into the general fund under advertising income, well, then I think it has to be consistent across the board, whether it be baseball, who has something, it's going to be, well, guys, you've raised it up to this point, but with the new policy, that's going to change it. And so I think it just has to be consistent that way.
I agree with you 100%, and I do believe, and I wish Jim was still here, but with baseball, with the help of their boosters, that's how they raise some money. And I do agree, we have to be consistent across the board, and that's something that I think, that's why I want to keep it in committee, get some recommendations, see what other schools are doing, find out about our baseball program, keep it in committee until next month, so we can start developing all these questions and answers, as opposed to holding any longer. I mean, I've had the conversation with Mike recently about that. Does it stay with the teams? I look at it as, that's something we have to discuss.
Well-
If it comes directly to us to where we can use it in a budget item, or if it goes with the athletic budget and cuts our 1% down to 0.5%, we still make out that way because we're not funding the full 1% to our athletic
And identifying basically if there's any areas that are off limits for the purpose of identifying or putting anything up. That I know now around Conningham, they have different things for the different years, recognizing
Right.
coaches and everything else. Well, is that off limits or isn't it off limits? So I think it's an identification as well, so multiple pieces, but
I mean,
yeah.
obviously, there's a lot to discuss, and that's why I feel that we should get the ball rolling in next committee meeting, because the longer we put it off, the longer it's gonna take. So, all these questions need to be answered, and I'm sure as we look into it, more questions are gonna arise. So I would like to see this on, with no objections, I would like to see this on the next committee meeting and see where we're at and what more we have to do.
Well, who do you want to do some of this research?
You.
Okay. Okay.
No, I think, I'll give that to Mike Simon at a meeting. I'll let you, I'm not gonna make him do it. I'll let you, hand out some work and things, I don't know what you wanna call it. I mean, I'll be more than I'll be more than willing to help you if anybody else wants to. But I'll let you, if there's some things you want us to look at, let you delegate it,
Authorize me to delegate.
Yes, if you don't mind.
Mr. Pitbull, if I could make a non-obvious point, if you make these revenues team-specific, you may run into a Title IX issue. So just something to keep in mind if you, before you go in that direction.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, we will put this on the agenda for next committee meeting?
Absolutely.
Correct? And I would be more than happy to do some research. I'm not
You were the
saying
first
that I
person I was gonna delegate to.
You'll be giving me a call tomorrow morning then, correct? I'll be
I
all
mean,
ready.
if any other board member would like to just help out on some research, shoot Mike an email. It's not gonna be anything, I'm hoping he doesn't give anybody anything that's gonna, interfere with your workday. But, he might. So just, shoot him an email, and you already know myself and Carrie, so we'll shoot
I
you
think, I
emails.
think an email going out to all the coaches that have fields and stuff would be helpful, just to start, so that we
Yeah,
can
good
find
for
out
you.
where we've been
Right.
with that type of thing, and then go forward.
I think we'll let
Okay.
Samantha decide who does what, just so we all don't email the same coaches, and that's, you know what I mean? We'll let him
Oh, I
decide.
meant, yeah, it would be one
He'll-
to all
Right,
coaches or whatever.
absolutely. All right.
Okay, so, is there any public that would like to have comment? There's not much left.
No?
Any comments? For Drew? Okay, then we will move on,
He's
and,
hanging around. He has a comment for something in academic.
yeah, so so, 810.1 will be on our policy to pass in February, because that will be the second reading. And this one is to be continuing on, all right, for the advertising. And that is it.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. And finally, we're down to academics, and we're gonna go to Ms. Price.
Hello, okay, academics, and today we have Mr. Steckel and Ms. DeVitro. Okay, good.
I'd like to address the first item,
Yes.
if I may,
Oh, okay.
with reference to the revisions to the 2013-14 school calendar. Can we take a look at that, please? I'm making a recommendation that we make up some days and make up days due to the inclement weather. We're looking at actually January 17th, which is fast approaching, February 14th, and April 17th. Those 3 days on our current approved calendar are in-service days, professional development days for the professional staff. And we're looking to use those and make them student days, and therefore 4 of the current snow days would be made up by using those 3 academic days. So changing them from professional development days to academic days. The discussion that took place by moving all of the snow days to the end of the year, there's probably more value on a given school day if we make it up now in comparison to making it up at the end of the school year. I know we'll lose valuable professional development time, but we can make that up in other ways by adding the professional development time to the end of the school calendar. There is built in, by contract, professional development time within the teacher day. We can take some of the things that we might be missing, move it into the professional development time in the teacher day. So not to take 2 steps backward with professional development. But we thought these would be good days to make up. And we'd make one alteration to the parent-teacher conferences that would be held in the spring at the elementary level. What we'd like to do is actually to move them one day, and it's reflected in the calendar, that we would start parent-teacher conferences on Thursday, the 10th of April, and run 5 half-days for the elementary students on 10, 11 of April, 14, 15, 16, and then go right into the 17th, which would be that additional day. This way, we wouldn't have students at the elementary level going 5 half-days, coming back for a full day to a half-day. So if we just move that one day, it also allows us to play with the marking periods, and we can make some minor adjustments to the marking period and extend some time during the 2nd and 3rd marking period. Yes, 2nd and 3rd. That's the reason for the proposed school calendar change. Do you have any questions with reference to the whys?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
April 17th, currently, that is a half a day, is that correct, or is that, is it currently not talking about the change, but is it currently a half day?
It was going to be,
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think it was a spring
Was
break
it a
day.
total spring date, spring
Yes.
break?
Mhm.
So
The
my,
6th.
is that right?
It was a half a day.
It was a half day.
We're turning it into a half a day. I'm
You turn,
sorry.
if this was,
Yes.
if this was, proposal was
That is
okay,
correct.
Yes.
then it would be turned into a
That is
half a
correct.
day.
I believe the 16th would have been the half a day
Yes.
originally.
Okay,
And we're making the 16th a full day and the 17th a half
okay.
a day.
My only
Yes.
concern regarding that would be, considering that, and I'm just thinking of the families in the district, not that everyone does this, but a lot of people utilize those days. They've already planned in their vacation, which was wrapped up around the Easter holiday.
That was discussed.
And I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
And we would consider that an excused day. You know, if they were
Right,
absent.
right.
So it wouldn't be penalizing the child.
Right, unless they've already used their 5 days on a different, I mean, I'm just saying, because we're now halfway through the year, so many people have used vacation days for either Christmas holiday, but prior to the Christmas, so just so that we're cognizant of that as an administration and board when we move forward.
and you know, it's just a principal's very little data. I have no data behind it. I only have it's like feel-good data or hearsay. And many people say to me, when I would say, well, look at this nice break that we have for the springtime, wouldn't that be a great time for you to go on vacation? To the contrary, that's not a good time to go on vacation because everyone else is on vacation at that time. So many parents would say, well, no, we're going to actually go on vacation prior to or after due to rates and all those kinds of things. I certainly understand that. But they were missing school and not taking it during the spring break. I just see, and I certainly understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
We weighed those factors, and in the calendar that was approved, it did say the 17th would be a makeup day in light of the fact that we may lose days due to snow.
Okay.
So it was one that was out there.
How does that fit in with the CIT and everything? Are the other school districts doing the same thing?
Actually, when we looked at this, I think the CIT is in session on those days and our kids are
And
going to
actually-
They
benefit
actually
from
gained,
it.
they benefited from that.
Okay.
Yeah, our schedule was actually a little different than the others.
I know, it's nice when we can get them,
Yeah,
It is.
right in
absolutely.
sync with each other.
Yep.
But if they're doing it in all the other districts, then we don't have a day lost there either.
Right, right.
Okay,
I have a question.
yes.
When it comes to the end of the year, and this is a question that gets raised by parents, in my neighborhood, we've got 2 weeks and 2 days reserved currently for makeup days.
Right.
What is the cutoff date by which we say, okay, we don't expect any more snow this year, and here's the final day? And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, when I looked at last year's calendar, I saw the 7th is the last day of school, and then makeup days. So I signed my kids up for things the following week, and then they had to go to school an extra week. So I lost some money because I wasn't checking the website to see this is the new calendar. So what is the date by which we will receive a recommendation to lock in, this is the last day of school?
Well,
Mr. Reinhardt?
I'm not so sure that that date exists. There are several factors that enter into this, and a lot of it being the contract for commencement and graduation and everything else. I'm not quite sure that there is a drop dead deadline for us to do that. Because I don't recall having snowstorms over an Easter break one time, significant snowstorms, which delayed school from closing
Few days.
for a few days, yes. So, I don't know if there's an answer to your question.
It
Well,
might be.
Can I ask this?
Yes.
Last year, I do not know that the parents were informed adequately about the change. Can we make sure that that
Yes.
happens adequately this year? Thank you.
Good point.
Back to that final day that is floating around there. I think we have to be careful to remember that snowstorms aren't the only reason that we close schools.
Sure. I mean, hurricane season
Yeah,
starts.
hurricane.
in June, right?
There could easily be something as simple as a water main break that shuts a building. You never know.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
I believe that I'm correct in saying this, that school cannot go past the 30th of June, because then it's a new fiscal year.
Yep.
I'm correct with that.
You
I am
clear on
correct with
that.
that. Am I? That's the way it is without you.
We have to make sure we get in the number of hours for instruction.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I don't know of any, look, I'll tell you that there was a time when the PDE, the governor, someone would forgive. And I can remember when we had, the last time we had serious snow in Easton, and it just so happened that affected Easton and Bangor, we had shared a couple days off that other districts who didn't border the river
Right.
didn't have to have off. And we were forgiven, both districts, for those days because of the emergency. I will tell you, the last time that I believe I heard that topic discussed in Harrisburg, we were told there would be no forgiveness during this administration. So, I'm not sure there's an easy answer.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
of course, that was several secretaries.
It was, I think it was the governor.
Nothing's for sure on the PDE, but I think you're fundamentally correct. I mean, but, I mean, the department would have to weigh in if the essence to make some adjustments, right?
Right.
As a practical matter, you probably.
Yeah, because that's what I've always been told in the
Yeah.
past. Granted, it was not the school district.
Please know that internal discussions are not, there's certainly a great deal of thought that goes into making these kinds of decisions, based on the fact that on those professional development days, we had activities planned. So we had to make some changes to all of those planned activities to determine how we are going to accommodate and make those plans at a future date. And then there are people who are contracted to do certain things, so we're looking to make sure we're not losing any funds, that we can move contractual obligations, meaning someone coming in and actually doing something. So we had to be very careful when we did that. Plus, then there's the parental component, and notifying them in a timely manner, and then making sure that you have an opportunity to view it and approve. To know if there.
Well, of great significance in this conversation, and I hate to make this, but I think this point has to be made, is that over the past several years, this whole business has turned in another direction as well, because we're going to be, quite frankly, evaluating the effectiveness of teachers, administrators, and schools, and school districts on the instructional levels of children, and quite frankly, I think we have to build schedules now with those days, with makeup days built in prior to those critical days of testing, because it is now more than ever, the impact of those testing results now goes beyond just our most important population of kids, but it affects everybody along the way. And so we need to get those days in every year as early as we can before those testing periods, just because of the impact of those tests. So.
And I do want to say, I think, the district did a great job this time communicating the January 17th change and the February change. So, yeah, very good job.
I think it's important to have built-in snow days. I really do.
Yeah.
So any other questions? Okay, so the next one is K-12 Academic Committee update.
Right, there's a brief written component that you have with reference to the Keystone Opportunity Grant. If you would take a moment or two just to review the information that was shared. It's just basically an update with reference to that grant. Math and literacy updates from the elementary perspective. We continue to look at the PA core and how that will impact our students and teachers. I don't need to get into all of the details. We are looking to realign our professional development. That was scheduled for those 2 days. Make sure that we can still find the time to get that done. And currently, there are no updates in Title I, Title II, Title III. Mr. Vitro, Ms. Mealy, Ms. Peters, and I continue to look at those funds to see how creative we can be with them to offset some of our budget costs. And a final comment. Class size report, if you go back in the minutes, you'll note that there would have been a class size report with reference to probably DIBEL scores and as well as any foresight documentation that we have for students in grades 3 and 4. We didn't take our second assessment in DIBELs. We're doing that winter assessment this month. So the report that I will share with you at an academics and education meeting will be coming in the near future. I was hoping that we'd have our second, we'll call it a dipstick, or a second test prior to this meeting, but we did not. We have that coming up within probably the next couple weeks. So at a future board meeting, I will share how we're doing with our DIBELS assessments, K to 4, as well as foresight. See if we can have some correlation with reference to class size. Any other questions with reference to any of those? Math literacy, any of the updates academically?
Any? Okay, I guess it's time to open up for any questions. No. Okay, that's surprising. Well, basically, I'm very glad that, this will be voting on the next meeting? Okay. So I'm glad that we have a amended school's calendar and that we can vote on next time. And at a future site, we'll have information on the double scores and class size and how it correlates.
Right, thank
Okay.
you, Ms. Perez. At this time, is there anyone in the public who would like to be heard on non-agenda items? I really thought it was academics.
I was expecting you to say.
President, I promise I'll throw a softball to Mr. Simonetta.
Hey, listen, Mr. Simonetta, throw a humble.
Given that you have a perfect crystal ball, and you have a non-resident student who's institutionalized, and the BEC says, get your money up front or a guarantee prior to letting him enroll, and you are allowed to surcharge him for an IEP, but you haven't yet enrolled him or evaluated him, how do you charge him in full for the IEP before you get him? And do you have that step-in process?
That's a softball question?
That's a softball. Now, and I say that in the context that there are many, many, many problems of enrolling students. And one by one, they're going to say, who the hell cares? Drew, you're bothering us. But collectively, $50,000 here, $100,000 someplace else, adds up to another teacher on his staff or another program someplace else. Recently, I opened up the paper and saw that you had a problem with a homeless student. And I didn't anticipate that when I never read the federal regs. But I did comment some time ago about you were too liberal about letting a student enroll before he actually got here, and too liberal about letting a student stay enrolled after the parents left. The problem being, if the parent becomes homeless in the meantime, you've inherited a problem. Now, you may have a very compassionate problem, but you may also have a very expensive problem. And I'm reminded that at least 3 examples I know of, a parent moved to Wilson, a parent moved to Phillipsburg, and a parent moved to Florida. Kids stayed here. One was a black parent, one was a middle school employee, and one was the close relative of a board member. Now, the question is, which one did you bother to review? And the correct answer is none of the above. Now, how many others took place, and how expensive do those become? My acquaintance who was enrolling students in a charter school 1,500 miles away did so with 10-year-old technology. Now, if you wrap it around a local charter and you call them homeless, you've got almost an impossible situation to control, and Mr. Simonetta would not even know it's happening because he'd find out too late, and your solicitor can work miracles, but only some. And the charter school homeless situation allows for tremendous flexibility in a community in a time when getting off the bus and walking up to a park bench makes me an Easton resident. That happens. And you're going to say, Drew, well, you live in College Hill, and you don't understand that. Well, I read the regs, and I realized that at least twice in my life I've been homeless, according to the regs. I lived in a trailer for about a year, and I lived in what amounts to a residential hotel for about a year. And along the way, I lived in a neighborhood where every night I could go up, and if I went over to the bedroom in the front of the house, I could hear gunfire. That didn't make me homeless, but it made my parents paranoid. And when you're 9 years old, you think it's fun. But not everybody, comes up without a few bumps and grinds along the way. But in addition to Mr. Simonetta and Mr. Freund trying to play catch-up, Mr. Pintabone, you seriously need somebody at the front door, accountable, responsible, to have very serious control over who comes in. Because you've got well-intentioned people on your staff who don't know what they're supposed to do, assume they're going to do the wrong things, have different instructions about doing the same things, and the result is you've probably got 50 people, 100 people that probably aren't yours. And that accounts for several teaching jobs, several programs, several music programs, a lot of other things. And I'm not seeking to pick on the student. I'm seeking to pick on the system which doesn't value its own values and running it tight as possible. Now, your solicitor is going to tell you there's not much you can do. And I'm going to say you got to do what you can do. And your policies are full of holes and full of inconsistencies. And you've got people who, for example, one person tells me you're not allowed to check social security numbers. Another one says, yes, you are. A third gives me a directive, which nobody's read, from the federal government that says, yes, you are, but you're not allowed to use them. And I don't know what the answer is. Somebody else says, you can't check tax returns. Somebody else tells me, we check them all the time, and they work, because people won't come. Another example, you've got, in Pennsylvania, if you're going to nail somebody, I'm sorry, I ran out of time on you, but you get the point. There's plenty of room for improvement. Put somebody on the front door, make them accountable, make them responsible, and empower them to do a great job, and back them up, because you've got people, good people, afraid to take action.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the, there's nobody else from public. All right, before we adjourn, everyone, all our board members can leave your stuff at your seat. Come over this way after the meeting, we have to take our new picture, our new board picture. Also, after that, we're gonna, 3 minutes, if you have to use the bathroom or something, we're gonna have a quick executive session. Ready? Motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?